Hello, everyone. Welcome to the Solar Astrology Podcast. I'm one of your hosts, Amiya.
And I'm Ambra. Hello, welcome back. This is an episode about the zodiac sign of Taurus. It is a fixed sign ruled by Venus, and it's the yin sign of Venus, which means it's feminine in nature.
It's also the exaltation of the moon. We will talk about this more in a second. We also want to mention that nothing is in fall in Taurus, and this will be elaborated more in the Scorpio episode.
Yeah, for sure. But what we can also understand from the fact that it's the exaltation of the moon is that Taurus really is a sign related with growth and fertility. It has an affinity with the earth. So, yeah, those are all lunar features, those are all lunar characteristics, and the sign of Taurus just absorbs them. In fact, it's really a sign related to agriculture as well.
Yes, it is definitely related to the earth, not only because it is an earth sign, but also just with the correlation of Venus and the moon being so present there. Also, it's, the second sign of spring. And here in the northern hemisphere, it's when everything begins to blossom, the flowers are blooming, nature is in its most beautiful form. And this is also part of the correlation we can see in the natural world. And also, the moon in itself is actually a planet very closely related to the Earth. One could argue that even scientifically, the moon has maybe proven the most to be of influence to the Earth, like it influences the tides and everything. So it's very much connected to the earthly body and our bodies as well.
Indeed, indeed. What I like the most about this sign, I think, is that the only sign, it's the sign of the goddesses, right? Because we have the domicile of Venus, the exaltation of the moon, and both are like the feminine planets, whereas all of the other planets are said to be masculine in nature, except for Mercury, which was said to be both masculine and feminine, depending on whether it was a morning or evening star. So yeah, Taurus is where the goddesses meet. So for sure there is this connection with nature, with earth.
We can also see this because Taurus, the sign of Taurus, is associated with the bull or with a cow, and the cow is a holy creature in India, also in a way related to the goddess because it's a sign of fertility and all of that.
Which is also pretty because it's really the first feminine sign of the zodiacal season. Because the zodiacal season starts with Aries, which is the masculine sign. So it's the first time in one cycle that we meet a feminine sign, which of course, once again, is related to fertility and growth and agriculture. I also think it's very nice to point out that Taurus is a fixed sign, and Taurus is steady and seems to steadily, how can you say, continue what was initiated during Aries season. So the blossoming and the developing of the spring of the flower of the nature is just sustained. We are in the middle of spring. The initial power brought from Aries is now stabilized in Taurus season.
Yes, exactly. And also, this is a fun fact for people that have not yet observed this phenomenon. Every season starts with a cardinal sign, in the middle is a fixed sign, and then it ends with a mutable sign. It's very interesting to look at it this way. So, the middle of the season is always ruled by a fixed sign. So, it's always when the season itself is the most powerful, you could say, the most stable part of the season. For example, in summer, if we can just put another example to make a connection there, it's Leo. That's the next fixed sign in order. It's when it's the most hot part of the summer, right? So it's like the most summeriest summer. And the same goes for spring. It's really like, what do people associate with spring? It's usually the flowers blooming, the earth, and everything, being able to go outside more, and that's related to Taurus
For
in
sure.
itself. Yes,
Yeah.
and as you said, the continuation in a way, it's like the cardinal signs really initiate and start the season. So it's like if we plant the seeds, you could say, in every season, or they begin to sprout. In Taurus season, a lot of stuff we plant begins to take on shape or form. We can physically see the seeds with our eyes, like the flower is actually there, it's visible, and we can touch it. Whereas in Aries season, it's still sometimes underground. Only the
Mhm.
first few crops are growing. And then in Gemini season, it gets a bit waning again, or just like other things start happening. For example, not that I don't want to go too much into Gemini season, but it's because it's like a mercurial sign. It's like the next sign and the next planet. We can see the bees starting to get very active. The bees are pollinating all the plants. That's a very mercurial thing. Like that's the change that Gemini season brings. So that's
Yeah.
just as for to round up spring, but
Yeah. And I
let's not
love
get too
that.
much in the next sign.
That's true, but I just love that while we are recording, Venus is in Gemini, and I really think of Venus in Gemini as a like a social butterfly, or like a social bee, which made me laugh a little bit. But for sure, being ruled by Venus, the sign of Taurus really cares about beauty, of course. And I think that we can make the comparison between the Venus that rules Taurus versus the Venus that rules Libra, because we see two different sides of the same planet. In this feminine sign, Venus loves the earth, Venus loves what's organic, and it's more related to spring, as we said. Whereas Venus in Libra, you know, rules that sign because in that period of the year, there is autumn, there is fall. The leaves are starting to get orange and brown, and they are just so beautiful. But we can see the beauty of growth and development in Taurus, whereas Libra, being a cardinal sign and the beginning of fall, it's like the initiation of the decay. But there is also beauty into that. So I think it's really interesting to stress this point. Venus rules beautiful times of the year in the northern hemisphere. So that's a nice comparison to make. But yeah, Venus loves what's beautiful, always.
Especially Venus and Taurus, since it is also correlated so much with the moon. It's so much about the physical senses that we have, about our body, and in that sense, a felt sense of beauty. Whereas in Libra, it's a bit of a different. It's not so much bodily as it is in Taurus, where it's really how can we experience beauty with our like
Yeah,
with touch, with with our eyes, with all of our organs in that sense, with all of our sensing organs. It's very much about that in Taurus season. So it's a gentle sign, can be a gentle sign in that way.
I agree. I agree. It just came into mind that when I was a child at school, they made us do some, I don't know, artwork by using colorful plastic bottles, you know, and by combining the different colors, some of the creation were very beautiful. And I think that Venus in Libra would love that, but Venus in Taurus would be like, no, that's plastic. It's not nice to touch. It's not as
Yes.
much beautiful as experience. For example, as planting a combination of flowers that are beautiful together. So it's a different, as you will said, it's a different beauty. It's more of beauty related with the five senses, with all of the bodily senses. Whereas Venus in Libra in general can be way more abstract, and also appreciate more the balance.
Absolutely. And I think this is the part where we can talk a bit about like the stereotype that Taurus always gets, which is if you look at all the memes, it's always like, oh, Taurus just eats food. Taurus always loves food. And there's obviously some truth to that. Like stereotypes come from a place, but I just want to emphasize that this is the place where it comes from. It's because Taurus is ruled by Venus and is exalted in the moon. And taste is also a sense, especially high taste, and experiencing the pleasure of food on your tongue. And not only that, also in medical astrology, Taurus rules like the throat, and it's the first place the food goes once we chew it. So it is, in a sense, very much correlated to what we physically take in. Food is just one aspect of that. And the fact that Taurus really likes good food, I mean, that's admirable. I don't think I don't think it's everything Taurus always does, but I really love that about the sign.
Definitely. It can be also described by a bigger principle. We could say more broadly that Taurus loves the bodily pleasures. It's not rare for Taurus people to indulge sometimes. It can be there in food or in substance or in, one particular activity that Taurian people really like, because it's Venus, it's the moon, it's the pleasure of the earthly experience we are living in. So sometimes there can be some indulgence, not only with food, but also with other things. But of course, the food is a big important thing here. Also for the correlation with agriculture and good quality things, good material, good food, good material, yeah, good primary sources, I would say.
Yes, and always tangible. So things that are from, you could say that about all the earth signs in a sense, because earth just rules physicality, like
Mhm.
things that are tangible, which we can actually hold, touch, and see. So if Taurus gets excessive, it's usually with material things.
Yeah, for sure. And I also I want to talk about the fact that it's a yin sign again, because it's really a slow sign. That's for sure also because it's a fixed earth sign. The earth is the least mutable element, we could say, and fixed is the least mutable modality. It's more on it requires their time. But again, it's the sign of the goddesses. It's a yin sign. And if masculine signs are much more rapid in thoughts or action, the feminine sign take more time. Think also about the process of reproduction. The man is important for reproduction, but it takes, just in the process of creation, it takes one night, whereas a woman takes 9 months. And I think that we can really see that in Taurus. It's the sign of the goddesses. And, there is an element of slowness, of things that are organic, and it's like an organic growth. I really love this about Taurus, which of course can be a downside, but when I have Taurian people around me and I see them being slow, you know them, and you're like, yeah, that's nice. You're just enjoying every small piece of your experience in some way.
Yes, it's definitely something to be admired about. I think that's something all the other signs can learn from Taurus is to take the time and while taking your time, actually enjoy it. Like to
Mm-hmm.
enjoy the process of creating things, of letting life happen and co-creating life. That's
Yes,
very Turian.
yes. Some days ago, I was having dinner with a friend, and we just said, okay, tonight we are going to eat slower than usual, literally feel every single taste in this dish. And then I started to laugh because I was like, of course, it's Taurus season. It's obvious that I'm doing it because this is a really Taurus thing to do. And
Yeah, like fine dining,
yeah,
definitely a Taurus thing.
yeah. I would say that Taurus is really in touch with its senses and so with taste as well.
Yes, and I also like now that you say that, I'm not 100% sure in that, but since where I live, there's a lot of famous winemakeries, so there's like a lots of grapes and stuff growing around here. But I'm pretty sure that the plants that start growing around this time get harvested around like Libra season, and that's like when the
Yeah,
winemaking process starts.
that's
So
actually true.
there's another connection. So in the Libra Venus part, it's when it's actually getting made. That's interesting.
That's funny and beautiful. Whereas Scorpio, the opposite sign of Taurus, rules the anus. So if we want to compare those signs, we have the ingestion of food versus the secretion of food. In fact, in the Taurus Scorpio polarity, we really have this contrasting theme of the fullness of life in Taurus and the decay, the middle of the decay in Scorpio season, where everything is just decomposing. Leaves are already on the ground, they are being decomposed by the microorganisms, and it's literally life versus death in Taurus Scorpio. But in both signs, being both fixed sign, we can see that this process is slow. It's steady. In Scorpio season, probably the leaves start to get decomposed, but you still see the leaves on the ground also in the winter. It's really a long process that's still initiated around, yeah, Scorpio season. So that's very beautiful.
Yes,
The
and the best part is that the
Scorpio?
decomposing process, yeah, no, but the
Sorry.
decomposing process is for the flowers to bloom again. Like
Yeah.
that's how it's connected. That's why it's always life, death, life, death, life, death. And the Scorpio Taurus axis especially, I think always reminds us of that. That
Yep.
that life always comes after death and death always comes after life. And that's just a cycle that goes on and on and on. And it's mostly metaphorical in our lives, but it's
Hmm.
a great metaphor to see this happening in nature and how even the decomposing side, when you don't really see aliveness out there, things are happening underground in preparation for the next blooming season.
Hmm. Hmm. I agree. And also, maybe from a psychological level, you enjoy more the pleasures of your life if you acknowledge that death exists, because then time starts to have a value. Like keeping that in mind can really change the quality of your time. I always think about my father. He's an undertaker, and he actually has a Taurus stellium in the eighth house, which is really appropriate for his work. But he always said to me that since when he began his work as an undertaker or gravedigger, as you want to call it, basically started to appreciate more life. And that's the Taurus Scorpio polarity as well, you know? So I just thought it was interesting because I was like, yeah, you're not a super Scorpio person. You're the opposite, right? You're very Taurian. But yet, acknowledging the opposite makes enjoy life. That's very poetic, and it's I guess a teaching of this axis. Even though sometimes the tension we can see between those two signs, I would say, is simplicity versus complexity. And that's maybe more yeah, that's maybe more attention, right?
Yeah, I mean, all the opposing signs hold attention because it's the opposing thing. But usually the tension it's like the same coin from different sides.
Mhm.
So there's also
Especially,
so much that connects them, and you
yeah.
can't really have one with the other. There's no real
Mhm.
balance.
Yeah. And I also think that, in masculine sign, the opposition can be a little bit more defined. Whereas in feminine sign, everything has multiple shades, and this is very much more highlighted. So, but yes, as you were saying, it's like the same, like two different sides of the same coin.
Yes, and to talk a bit more about the simplicity versus complexity thing going on between Taurus and Scorpio, and how you can kind of combine both of those. It's that, well, also in tarot, Taurus is represented by the Hierophant, which is what people usually also refer to the guru, but I don't really like throwing that word out there just like that. But essentially, if you think about a wise person sits on top of the hill, you usually take the super long journey to get there. And then you ask them questions, and it's usually the wise person that can answer a very complex question in a very simple way, where you feel like, whoa, this can only be answered like that because the person has undergone through the complexity. Like you can really only understand one when you understand the other.
Mm-hmm.
So I feel like I don't like when people just throw around that Taurus is a simpleton
Yeah.
because I think a lot of Taurian people actually have big depth to them, and being able to explain something complex in a simple way is a quality I hold in very high regard. And I say
Mm-hmm.
that with someone that has a lot of Scorpio in their chart. So
Yeah, it's a
I really
mastery.
admire that. Yes. Whereas again, obviously Scorpio can do the other thing. It's like, okay, well, let's dissect this simple idea and analyze it, from all the sides.
I agree.
And and I think I don't know where I heard this example. I've heard it somewhere. I think a lot of people use example, but I love it so much. It's like if you would just go look at the sunset with like Taurus and Scorpio, it's like the Taurus person would be like, oh wow, that sunset is so beautiful. I feel the beauty. Like I just want to enjoy this day. Whereas Scorpio would be like, oh, but like why does the sunset every day? Like how alive are we if every day is different? What can we do? Like
Okay.
asking all these questions,
And the
Taurus,
Taurus
let's just
person
enjoy
would
it.
be, yeah, the Taurus person. Yeah, actually, it happens to me. I have a very dear friend who has a lot of planets and the ascendant in Taurus. I have a lot of things in Scorpio. That always happen. And he always look at me and says, why don't you just enjoy it? Why are
Yeah.
you asking all of this question? It also made me laugh because I have another example that could represent this. At the university, for example, you have to do your own research sometimes. And maybe you take a lot of time, a lot of effort, you go a lot into depth, and then what you maybe have to present needs to be summarized in 10 minutes, 15 minutes, everything that you worked for like months. And that's really the thing, because when you learn how to summarize things, it means you really have mastered them. Because it's, of course, super difficult to summarize something that you haven't fully understood. But of course, it's always challenging sometimes, to summarize. And yeah, Taurus does it just easily sometimes, just a few words that encapsulate perfectly what I wanted to express. Like a few words that encapsulate complexity. That's very poetic and beautiful, in my opinion.
Yes. And like this truths, this universal truths that are like true throughout eternity, which you kind of always have to look back to,
Mhm.
which is the fixedness, where it's like, oh yeah, like I realize yet again that, oh, this is true, and I just need to do this. And then you forget again, and then you come back to it, or you realize the same thing over and over again. Like, is like, I just see that in my life where there's like, okay, I've realized this one truth about something, and then you always come back to it, and it's like yet a deeper layer. And
I
it's like,
agree.
oh yeah, yeah. So it's kind of like that. Yet they're so simple. So
Yeah.
complex, but so simple. That's Taurus Scorpio.
I think that you can also see that a lot in psychology. I mean, I don't have any credential in psychology, but just because sometimes people in general have a lot of worries about something or have a lot of problems, and maybe all of them are due for multiple reason, but simple reason. A lot of time in the human mind, certain things are simpler than what we think. Certain things are really, yeah, really straightforward and simple. But we always tend to, I mean, a lot of people, I also do that, of course, tend to enlarge thing and think there is a lot of complexity, and we tend to forget the simplicity, which is something that can be very healing. And that's also another lesson that people can learn from Taurus people, the simplicity. It's not being narrow-minded. Simple
Yeah.
things can really change the perspective. It's a power sometimes. Of course.
Yeah. I think as a Scorpio person, I have actually been like offended by how simple things can be.
Yeah.
Like um just from personal experience where sometimes you go through things and you're just like, wow, actually it was that simple. Like your ego holds on so much to something that seems so complex where actually it's like it's not, and then you're just like you kind of are offended deeply, or at least I was at some points in my life where it's like, oh wow, really, like all of this energy, but I just had to make that like switch of perspective or something. And it
Yeah.
is true, like it's actually harder than one thinks, which is funny, but I've seen this so many times.
Yeah.
And I'm also not a psychologist, but I have a background in working as a psychiatric nurse for around 6 years. And I've seen this so many times in people, but not just in people. It's so much that people also just come, and there's very simple lifestyle changes that should be looked at first, which can
Mhm.
already improve the health. So, like talking about food, it literally food can
Yeah.
influence the life so much. And are you vitamin deficient? Like that can
Mhm.
cause a lot of things health
Yeah.
wise, mentally, and everything. Are you going enough out in nature, just taking walks? Are you physically active? Things like that, without even focusing right on medications. There's so many things that you could do and
Definitely.
adjust, which are very simple, yet people, even the physicians, treat it as if it were
Mhm.
the most complex thing ever, when there are many, many small things that you can do and people definitely do. I don't want to
For sure.
undermine them, but that's a also a good example of this.
Someone said, I'm rephrasing this, but someone said something along the lines of the most the easiest explanation is often the most probable. And I think
Hmm.
that's so Turian, but it's actually so true, because when the fundamentals, when the ground of a certain thing is not stable, then a lot of problems rise. But if you fix the ground and you have a stable ground, then a lot of things can grow. And that's Turian.
Yes, yes. And I'm thinking, so I've thought about this metaphor literally like yesterday or something, where again, it's so simple, but if you think of humans as plants, because we are like part of nature,
Yeah.
and like, what does a plant need? It needs fertile soil to grow.
Mm-hmm.
We need that as well. It needs enough water, it needs enough sunlight. It's very simple things a plant needs to grow and to blossom and bear fruit, or whatever type of plant it is. It is the same with us.
Mm-hmm.
It's the
Mm-hmm.
same with us. And it starts with the soil. Like, how good is the soil that the plant is growing in? And that's our base.
Yeah, for sure, for sure. I also think that, you know, the we can see a lot of Korean people that love tranquility and being calm. Of course, everyone loves that, but Korean people kind of need that, kind of need that stability, tranquility, and peace. And they are often annoyed or feel highly under pressure when they are pushed or rushed. What I like the most of this characteristic is that it's so basic. If Taurus is about the basic things of life that make you happy, Taurus also remind us that peace and tranquility are paramount, and it's easy to forget that we need these nowadays with, everything being so rushed and everyone is just stressed out. And Korean people are just like so attuned with that. They're often people that need to have a relationship with nature. Everyone benefits from that, of course, and also non-Korean people need that. But for Korean people, it's kind of more normal. It's kind of like more of a need. And yeah, I had this Korean friend growing up, and when she was tired or when we had too many things to do, she was just crying and she was just telling me, no, I know I'm such a baby, but this is too much. And we were still kind of child, and I always thought it was so sweet. She also had like a Pisces moon, which I think came into the situation. But I'm like, yeah, you have a radar, you can spot when it's too much because you're attuned with your bodily senses, with your limits. That's just
Yes.
nice.
Yeah. And I think with this, we can also talk a bit about the downsides of
Definitely.
Taurus. I'm sorry, but we also need to talk about this.
Yeah, because we love the earth. We love being grounded and real. Okay, realistic.
Yeah, and that's well, talking about Earth can be very inflexible,
Mhm,
can also be very rigid.
mhm.
Not all Earth, like I'm right now I'm thinking about, like earthquakes and stuff. But,
And you're
but
like, are you
essentially,
sure?
but essentially Earth is a very like fixed ground. At least that's what we wish it would be.
Yeah.
But therefore, the qualities of Taurus itself. Also, I mean, obviously, Taurus just being a fixed sign. All fixed signs have this problem. It's of,
Mhm.
maybe not being too flexible.
Yeah,
So
over rigidity. Over rigidity.
exactly, and a lot of times it's also in the mind. It's like a very rigid mind where I've seen Victorian people where it's just like I've been doing it this way, and like I know that this will give me like pleasure or achieve good results, and I'm not gonna try another way.
Yeah.
This I know this is the safe way. I'm not gonna go another way
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
because this way makes me feel good.
Totally. These signs prioritize stability at the point that can have difficulties to go out of the comfort zone or trying new things. Because it's like that's the safe route. Why should I change it?
Yeah, especially because it's like linked to bodily pleasures. And obviously, we all get into our comfort zones. I just think Taurus is one of the harder signs to move out of the comfort zone because like if there's no reason why, then like why would they change? I mean, I guess every person has it to a certain degree, but Taurus can, or at least that's what I saw with many people, that
Mm-hmm.
it's just a tiny bit more rigid than the other people, where they're just
Mm-hmm.
like, I'm good. My life is pleasurable. Why would I change if I don't really
Yeah.
need to?
And sometimes, this answer can be said with a bit of stubbornness because Taurus is like, I know what I like and can be very stubborn on that, because he's like, usually Taurus decisions are really related to the bodily senses. So when they feel like someone else is trying to suggest other things or maybe making a constructive feedback, Taurus can be, why are you telling that to me? I know what I like. I know my things. So that is also probably the result of over rigidity and inflexibility. Sometimes it can happen. So it is a little bit stubborn.
Yes, I'm also thinking, I think it might also be a bit of a Taurus Scorpio axis, but just the concept where, you know, energy flows through us. And essentially, the point is to be able to let go of it all so that we let the bad or negative or unpleasant experiences pass through us, but also the good experiences, which are actually pleasant because they don't last forever either.
Mhm.
And many people think always about the negative experiences and how they want to let this go. But at the same time, they're then holding on to a concept or something that happened that was pleasant in their life, which they also need to let go of because that is also keeping them in the comfort zone. Like if you're
Yeah.
just focusing on, like, oh, when I was, I don't know, 14 years old, I had this good experiences and I want to have this good experience always, or like, oh, this was nice. I want to desperately hold into this thing that is so nice. So you're also not letting this flow through you. So you're
Mhm.
not really accepting that life is movable and changeable and actually constantly changeable and that you constantly need to adapt. And I'm thinking also about this because, again, it's so much of the sensory organs and it's the pleasant experiences that can equally get stuck in our body and be a
Mhm.
point of fixation
Yeah.
just as the bad experiences or the unpleasant experiences.
Yeah, that in general, all of the fixed sign. While you were talking about this, my Leo rising was getting triggered because of course we change in our lives. But I had a period, in which I changed in a way that I didn't necessarily like. And, in my head, I was like holding the image of the past and how good the past was, you know, and, I really, sometimes I still need to work on to that because fixed signs, when they have that perfect image in their head, they're like, I don't want to move away from that. Especially Leo, because Leo also in the season, it's in the middle of the summer, but doesn't want to kind of give up, doesn't want for the darkness to come. So it's kind of like trying to stabilize the light, but let's just focus on Taurus. But that's a similarities of all of the fixed signs. With Aquarius, I would see that in a way in which maybe the Aquarius is like, no, I don't want to let go of my idea because this has to work somewhat sometimes.
Yeah, like the fix it. I mean, we can talk a bit about fixed signs, like it's fine. Then we have a bit of a comparison.
Exactly, it's
Um,
good.
and also, I'm a Scorpio rising. I'm also fixed. I have the same problem. Um, but like in Aquarius, the fixedness is usually more mental, and it's
Mhm.
really of like I really don't like the concept of how the world works or whatever. I have a new, better concept, and this is
The
the
best.
the best. And I'm not gonna change. Like the idea that I view the world in a different way is the worldview. Like we should all look at this
Mhm.
way.
Yeah. Um,
People forget. I feel like oftentimes people forget that like Leo and Aquarius are fixed signs. They're so fixed in their own ways.
yeah, actually, I'm a university student and I always have so much fun because I have a way to know the birthday of my teachers, basically. Not the birth charts, but still, what I've noticed is that I had a couple of Aquarius teacher, and I swear that, they were the teacher that if you answered something that was correct but was not as they would have phrased it, or it's not, maybe it's correct but still it is in conflict with some of their ideas. If the question is more about ideologies, they are the way, like they are very strict about it, you know. And it was just funny to me to observe, because there was this being fixed, mentally fixed on your ideas or what you think it's right or wrong, when how things should be first can be that way. Also in Taurus, you know, sometimes we have this steady determination, and almost like, even though Taurus is the sign of the goddesses, it is kind of bloody, probably because it's the sign of the goddesses. I'm sorry, but that's a thing. And sometimes Taurus can be like, I want to go there and I want to satisfy my needs. And sometimes this can just end up in really bad things, because it's prioritizing their own needs, their own stability, which, of course, it's a classical example. But yeah, Hitler had a lot of Taurus planets. So yeah, that's my view onto that. You know, the determination of Taurus, of wanting to get their own wealth somewhat, can be a little bit brutal, but that's really, I think, the worst thing. And in Scorpio, the fixity is more, as you were saying at the beginning, you know, maybe not being able to let go of a painful experience. For example, not being able to forgive sometimes. I have this, like, Scorpio planets can be those planets that don't forget that child that bullied you at the elementary schools. That's my
Yeah.
take on the fixity in Scorpio.
Yes, that's kind of what I thought when I said I don't know if it's a Scorpio Taurus axis, but I think it is.
Yeah.
It's like Scorpio is more the sign that will hold on to like unpleasurable experiences that were hurtful,
Mhm.
so it can't let go and continue. And Taurus will is gonna hold on to pleasurable experiences and equally can't then evolve and live life to the fullest because it's holding on to like, oh, this was so good back then. Whereas Scorpio is more like, oh my gosh, it was so bad, I don't want this to happen again. And Taurus is like, oh, it was so good, I want always this to happen in this way. So it is kind of
Definitely.
like that.
Definitely. Yes, I just wanted to make it clear. Yeah, that was like our take on the fixity of Scorpio.
For sure.
But yeah, in regards to Mars, Mars is debilitated into Taurus. It's in its detriment.
Yes, and that's because all Venus signs don't do well in Mars, and all Mars signs don't do well in
Mhm.
Venus.
Yes, we can see that Mars wants what it wants. And Mars in Taurus is a Mars that it's not like, it doesn't do well, because of course Taurus wants peace usually, and being ruled by Venus, whereas Mars wants to fight more. I feel that with Mars in Taurus, we see kind of the pushiness of the sign being enhanced. I would say the possessiveness and the control, the need for control, are really ways in which Mars in Taurus can express itself. Like the
Yes,
stubbornness can be like taken to an extreme level. And once again, like not wanting to let go can go too far, like over the expiry date, detrimental way for like the self and the others, really.
yes, it goes into some of the more negative qualities that we were talking before. And because Mars is in its detriment there, it's just usually more visible. Like you can see these qualities more visible there. Where, of course, even if, Venus, Taurus is in Venus in its ruling sign, it can have other connotations such as, perhaps eating too much or like possessing too many beautiful things or whatever. It's like it's a different type of extreme, but like with Mars there, it's often like this stubborn, because Mars has so much to do with our action and why we do what we do, like our will power and all of
Mhm.
that. And there it can just be this overexerting thing where you fight battles you literally do not need to fight anymore. It's
Yeah,
like the war has ended. Why are you still standing on a battlefield?
it
That
makes
type of
sense.
thing.
It makes sense to me. It makes a lot of sense.
Yes, and I'm also thinking, I think we talked about this briefly last time we had a conversation of what type of art Mars and Taurus would make.
Oh, yeah.
Because it's obviously not like if you have Mars and Taurus, is not just a bad thing.
No,
I
exactly.
just want to emphasize that. Um, I feel like it would be really beautiful, like macabre artwork
Hmm.
that is, and I think I said the sentence which sometimes people use where it's like, oh, art isn't supposed to be nice; it's supposed to make you feel something. I really
Yeah.
think that is a very Mars and Taurus statement where
Hmm.
people would literally do something to, yeah, get a reaction of somebody, like stir up some values, right? Because Venus has so much to do with the values. So with Mars there, it could be something like, oh, like you think this is beautiful, how about I add some grotesqueness or some darkness to it and see what this makes you feel like.
Yeah. And I think about this kind of art, but with like natural elements as well.
Mhm.
Like, yeah. Also, dried flowers, they are not so macabre, but in a way, they express this archetype. It's like the beauty of nature, but the nature is death. And with that art, you can see that. You can really see the Taurus Scorpio polarity, which, of course, I feel that when Mars is in Taurus or when Venus is in Scorpio, this thing is enhanced. Like the you have more reference to the Taurus Scorpio polarities. It comes more natural. In general, with like planets in detriment or fall, you work a lot with the archetypal polarities. I really like what you said about the art.
Yeah, thank you.
You're welcome. Yeah, it just made me reflect, and I was like trying to imagine the kind of arts in my head, which was fun exercise. I'm not an artistic person that much, so I need imagination sometimes.
Yes, I don't know if there's an artist, like I don't know by heart right now if there's an artist that has Mars and Taurus. It would be very interesting to see what type of art they created. I would assume it could be something like that. Or again, as you said, where they use natural elements, so they use
Mhm.
things of the earth, like a sculpture, like something, that is like big, huge. You can
Mhm.
touch, but you shouldn't touch. But
Yeah.
I'm curious. So I'm actually curious right now. You could cut this part out, but like I
Yeah, no,
actually,
let's have a look.
2 hours later.
Also, Rudolf Steiner had Mars in Taurus, and I think it's just such a beautiful example because I got to know people that, as a child, went to Steiner schools. In Switzerland, that's possible. We have some of them. Basically, in there, the educational methods were really particular, and they were based basically on letting the child play with nature a lot. And a lot of that was based on crafting things with their own hands. So, for example, they would go on the woods, grab something, and then they had to craft something on their own. So the focus was so much on to letting the child play with its sand and actually, learning from the senses, which is so Turian, and I love that. But I was also a little bit shocked because, they could use knives, for example, to cut things and, things that maybe could have been dangerous for a child. But, the philosophy was just saying, no, the child will learn how to use them and they will not get hurt. You know what I mean? So in this way, it's a little bit Martian. It's like, no, expose child to nature in its growth, to nature in its decay, and to what's also potentially dangerous for the sake of learning and learning with the senses, which is something I really appreciated. I'm not so much into Steiner philosophy. I don't know a lot about anthroposophy, but I just love the educational methods. I think it's very Turian, and I see the role of Mars in Taurus there. Okay, I think that's everything. Thank you for listening, and we will see each other on the next episode, which is going to be about Gemini. So I wish you a very nice day. Bye!
Thank you for listening, guys. Bye.